I never thought paying off my sister's mortgage would be the reason she cut me out of her life. But here we are. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lena Quinn. I'm 32, a nurse from Oregon, and I've always been the kind of person who believes family comes first. My younger sister, Maris, is 28. We were close growing up. I practically raised her after our mom passed away. I worked long hours and saved for years, always trying to make sure she never had to struggle the way I did. When Maris went through a rough divorce 2 years ago, she was left with nothing. Her credit was ruined, her confidence shattered, and she was drowning in bills. I helped her get back on her feet, little by little. She wanted a fresh start, a home of her own, but couldn't qualify for a mortgage. That's when I made a decision I thought would change her life. I quietly paid off the entire house she wanted. I used the inheritance our mom left me. It wasn't about pride, it was about love. I wanted her to feel safe again. I didn't tell her. I wanted to surprise her at her housewarming party, to hand her the documents and say, "You don't owe a cent. You're free." I imagined her crying, hugging me, maybe even seeing that we'd finally made it. After all the pain, I thought this was how we'd rebuild our bond. But then, 3 days before the party, I got a text. It was short. "Hey Lena, about Saturday. You don't need to come. It's kind of a small thing. Don't take it personally." I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to make sense of it. I called her, but she didn't answer. The next morning, I got another message. "Please don't make things awkward. You always turn everything into about you. Just let me have this one." My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I scrolled through old pictures of us, birthdays, holidays, late-night talks, wondering what I'd done wrong. That night, I called one of our old friends, Dana. She hesitated before saying, "Lena, Maris told everyone you've been trying to take credit for her house, that you've been acting like it's yours." I felt like I'd been punched. The house I bought for her, the one I planned to reveal as a gift, had somehow turned into proof that I was jealous and controlling. I sat there in my small apartment, staring at the wall, wondering how my own sister could twist something so pure. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept thinking about how money can't buy love, and how sometimes, even the people you'd give everything to can turn around and shut you out without a second thought. I called Maris the next morning, hoping she'd pick up and explain everything. The line rang several times before a man's voice answered. It wasn't hers. "Yeah," he said, sounding half amused. "Who's this?" "This is Lena," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm Maris's sister. Can I talk to her?" There was a pause, then a faint chuckle. "Oh, right. She's busy." I could hear voices behind him, laughter, music playing softly. Then I caught it, Maris's laugh. My chest tightened. "Derek, please," I said, realizing who he was. "I just want to understand why I wasn't invited. Did I do something wrong?" He sighed, as if this conversation was beneath him. "Look, Lena, Maris is moving forward. She wants to start her new life without old attachments dragging her down. You get that, right?" His words hit me harder than I expected. "Old attachments?" I repeated quietly. "I'm her sister." "Exactly," he said, his tone dripping with smugness. "Family's great and all, but sometimes people need distance. She's trying to build something fresh. Let her do that." I could still hear Maris in the background, talking, laughing. She wasn't protesting. She wasn't asking him to hand her the phone. She wasn't even acknowledging me. It felt like someone was slowly turning the volume down on everything familiar, until all I could hear was silence and the faint hum of a new life that no longer included me. "Can you tell her I called?" I managed to say. "She knows," Derek replied, and the line went dead. For a long time, I stood there holding the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, replaying every word. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, that maybe she didn't know what he'd said. But the laughter in the background told me otherwise. She'd heard it all. I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the cup of coffee I'd forgotten to drink. The steam was gone, but the ache in my chest was fresh. Maris had always been my person, the one I protected, cheered for, and carried when she couldn't stand. Now it felt like she'd traded me for someone new, someone who didn't even bother pretending to respect me. I tried to picture the housewarming party, Maris standing beside him, smiling as guests congratulated. My name wouldn't come up. My place in her life had been erased, rewritten by a man who didn't know our history. I thought about deleting her number, pretending I didn't care, but that wasn't me. If she was going to shut me out, I needed to understand why. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't crash her party, but I wasn't staying away either. I'd go, not to celebrate, but to face the truth. Whatever it turned out to be, I needed to see the kind of person my sister had become. 3 years earlier, everything looked different. Maris was sitting on my couch, her mascara streaked, hands trembling as she held the divorce papers. Tate had left her with nothing but a broken heart and a pile of unpaid bills. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like the world had pressed her flat. "I can't do this, Lena," she whispered. "I can't start over." I remember kneeling beside her, saying the only thing that felt right. "Yes, you can. You're not alone." At the time, I meant it with every piece of me. I worked double shifts at the hospital, skipped vacations, and chipped away at her debt bit by bit. Credit cards, medical bills, even the old car loan Tate had dumped on her. I handled them quietly, making sure her name stayed clean. She didn't ask me to, not directly. She just cried, and I couldn't watch her sink. Once the worst was over, she started talking about a little blue house near the edge of town. "It's small, but it feels like me," she said, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. I drove her there one rainy afternoon. The paint was chipped, the yard wild, but she stood on that porch like it was a castle. She didn't have the credit or savings to buy it. I did. I told her I'd co-sign, but when the paperwork came through, I went further. I used what was left of Mom's inheritance, the money she'd told us to use, for something good. I thought this was that something. I paid off the entire mortgage in her name, planning to surprise her later when she was ready to rebuild. When the banker handed me the final receipt, I felt proud. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about honoring Mom's last words. I could still hear her voice in the hospital room, faint but sure. "Take care of Maris. She doesn't see the world the way you do." Back then, I didn't question it. I thought Mom was reminding me to be patient, to guide her. Maris had always been the dreamer, the one chasing beauty and attention while I handled the hard parts. I figured it was my role to protect her. But lately, that line echoes in my head like a warning I missed. Maybe Mom saw something I didn't, a difference that went deeper than personality. Maybe Maris's world was one where gratitude could turn into resentment, where love felt like control. I remember standing in that empty house the day before Maris moved in. The keys were warm in my hand. I looked around at the quiet rooms, imagining laughter, holidays like. I never imagined it would all twist into this. Mom's voice had felt like a blessing then. Now, it sounds more like a curse I walked right into. A week after that call, I ran into Dana at the grocery store. She hesitated when she saw me, like she wasn't sure whether to say hello. I gave her a small smile anyway, trying to act normal. We used to hang out all the time when Maris and I were close. Now, even small talk felt loaded. We chatted about work and the weather until she finally blurted out, "Hey, I heard about Maris's housewarming. Are you going?" I froze. "I wasn't invited," I said. "Why?" Dana's eyes widened. "Seriously? That's strange. She's been talking about it nonstop." She shifted her weight, then lowered her voice. "She's been telling people how she bought the place all by herself. Said it took her months of saving after the divorce." The word stung. "She said that?" Dana nodded quickly. "Yeah. And her boyfriend keeps going on about how he handled all the paperwork and helped her plan everything. He even joked about being the reason she finally got her life together. Everyone thinks they're like this perfect couple who built a future from nothing." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the shelf of canned soup behind her, my hands tightening on the cart handle. A dull ringing filled my ears. She kept talking, filling the silence. I mean, good for her, right? She really turned things around. I didn't realize she didn't, I said quietly. Dana stopped. "What?" I forced a small smile. "Never mind." I didn't have the energy to explain. What was I supposed to say? That every dollar came from me? That her miracle comeback was my doing? No one would believe it now. The story she'd told had already taken root. Dana tried to change the subject, but I could barely hear her. My mind was racing through every conversation Maris and I ever had about honesty, loyalty, trust. She'd looked me in the eye so many times and promised she'd never lie to me. Now she was lying to everyone else. And worse, she was proud of it. When I got back to my car, I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. My silence had built her image. I'd thought keeping quiet made me kind, patient, selfless. But that silence had given her room to rewrite the truth. I imagined her laughing with Derek at the party, his hand on her shoulder as he told people how he'd helped her budget. I could picture her nodding, smiling, pretending the struggle had been all hers. Every sacrifice I made was gone, erased with a single lie. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was realizing that my sister liked the new version of the story better, the one where I didn't exist at all. The night of the housewarming, I sat in my car across the street for nearly 10 minutes before stepping out. The neighborhood was glowing with porch lights and laughter spilling from open doors. Maris's house looked perfect, the kind of place you'd see on a real estate ad. Warm light, music, clinking glasses. I held a small gift bag in my hands, the frame inside wrapped carefully in tissue paper. It was a photo of us with Mom at the county fair, the last picture we ever took together. I told myself I wasn't going there to cause trouble. I just wanted to see her, maybe say a few words, and hand her the gift. Maybe she'd remember who we were before all this. As I walked up the driveway, I could hear Derek's voice before I even reached the door. Confident, loud, performing. He was telling some story about how he handled all the closing documents himself. People laughed, and the sound made my stomach twist. I rang the bell once. The chatter quieted. After a moment, Derek opened the door, his expression shifting when he saw me. He leaned his arm against the frame like he owned the place. "Well," he said with a smirk, "we didn't think you'd actually come." I met his eyes, keeping my voice steady. "Can you tell Maris I'm here?" He didn't move. Behind him, I could see the crowd, glasses in hand, smiles frozen, curious. The smell of wine and candles mixed in the air. Then Maris appeared from the kitchen, wearing a new red dress I'd never seen before. Her face flushed when she saw me, but she didn't look surprised. "Lena," she said softly, then louder, "I thought we talked about this." I took a step forward but didn't cross the threshold. "You said I shouldn't make things awkward." "I won't." I lifted the bag slightly. "I just came to drop this off." She hesitated, glancing at Derek, who folded his arms like he was guarding something valuable. The guests were silent now, eyes darting between us. I handed her the gift. The tissue paper rustled as she peeked inside. For a second, something flickered across her face, something human, something that looked like guilt. Then it was gone. She started to close the door, whispering, "You should go." That was when the words came out before I could stop them. Calm, almost quiet. "I just wanted to see the house I bought you." It was like a glass shattered. The room behind her went still. I could hear someone gasp. Another person whispered something I couldn't make out. Derek's grin faltered. Maris froze, the frame still in her hands. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp and trembling. "What did you just say?" But I didn't repeat it. I just stood there, looking at the house, the walls I'd paid for, the lights I'd imagined would feel like home. And for the first time, she couldn't hide behind the story she'd built. Maris's face went pale, but she tried to recover, forcing a tight smile. "Lena, don't do this here," she whispered. I stepped forward, calm but certain. "You've already done this, Maris. I just came to finish it." I pulled a slim folder from my purse, one I'd debated bringing all week. The room seemed to close in around us. People shifted, pretending not to stare. The smell of wine and roasted food hung thick in the air. "I didn't come to embarrass you," I said softly. "I came because you erased me, and I can't let you rewrite my life along with yours." Derek moved between us, his voice loud and mocking. "This is pathetic. She's jealous, can't stand seeing her sister do well." He looked around at the guests, fishing for agreement. "You don't have to listen to this drama." I didn't look at him. Instead, I opened the folder and laid the papers neatly on the small entry table beside the door. "These are the bank transfers," I said, keeping my voice even. "Every payment came from my account. The title was filed under my name until I cleared the mortgage. Every receipt, every confirmation here." Derek scoffed. "Anyone can print fake documents." "Then check," I said quietly, turning to Ally, Maris's oldest friend, who stood near the kitchen doorway, her glass halfway to her lips. "You can check if you think I'm lying." Ally hesitated, glancing at Maris, then slowly stepped forward. She picked up the top sheet, eyes scanning the numbers. When she looked back at me, her expression had changed. This is real." A murmur ran through the room. Someone whispered, "She paid for it?" Another voice answered, "The whole thing?" Maris's breathing grew shallow. "You had no right," she snapped. "This was my chance to start over." "It was supposed to be," I replied. "That's why I didn't tell you. I wanted you to feel strong again. I didn't need credit. But you didn't just take a house. You took my silence and made it your story." Her eyes filled, but she tried to keep her chin high. The noise around us felt distant, like we were standing in a bubble where nothing else existed. Derek grabbed his drink, muttering, "This is ridiculous," before storming toward the backyard door. The slam echoed through the living room. Maris stood motionless, staring at the documents spread across the table. The photo frame was still in her other hand, pressed against her chest like something she didn't know what to do with. People were whispering now, shifting uncomfortably. The music had stopped. The lights felt too bright, the air too heavy. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just watched her, waiting for the truth to land. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, as if the house itself was too big for her to stand inside. The quiet didn't last. Maris's breathing grew louder, uneven, until she suddenly slammed the folder shut. The sound made everyone flinch. "You had to do this now," she shouted. "You couldn't stand that for once something in my life wasn't about you?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer, trembling, her face red. "You think you're some kind of savior, but you're not. You're just desperate for people to thank you." Her voice cracked, but she kept pushing. "You wanted everyone to know you're the good sister, the generous one, the martyr. You wanted credit. Don't pretend otherwise." The room was frozen. A few people put down their drinks and quietly headed toward the door. No one wanted to witness this kind of truth. I met her eyes, steady. "I never wanted credit," I said. "I wanted a sister, not a debt collector. Her expression shifted from anger to disbelief, like she couldn't process the words. "Don't twist this on me," she yelled, her voice breaking. "You've always tried to control everything, what I do, who I see, how I live. You can't stand that I finally have my own life." "Your own life," I said quietly, "built on a lie you told about mine." She laughed then, a bitter sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You think you're better than me. That's what this is about." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to defend. Around us, the crowd had thinned. Only a few faces lingered, pale with discomfort. Someone whispered that they should call it a night. Another slipped out the back, pretending to take a phone call. The hum of departure filled the air. Maris looked around, realizing everyone was leaving. "See what you did?" she screamed, pointing at me. "You ruined everything. You couldn't let me have one night. One single moment that wasn't about you." Her voice echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls I'd paid for, filling the space that had once felt like a gift. She turned away, knocking over a glass of wine as she did. Red spilled across the floor, spreading like a wound neither of us could stop. I bent down and picked up the frame from the table, the photo of us and Mom. I stared at it for a moment. Maris was smiling in that picture, her arm around me, both of us sunburned and happy. I set it back down gently. "Goodbye, Maris," I said softly. She didn't turn around. She was crying now, shoulders shaking, muttering something I couldn't hear. I didn't stay to find out what it was. I walked out the front door without another word, the night air cool against my face. Behind me, I could still hear her shouting, though the words were fading. The house glowed warmly from inside, but to me, it finally looked empty. Weeks went by without a single word from Maris. No calls, no messages, not even a forwarded bill or stray email. The silence settled heavy, stretching across the days like a weight I couldn't put down. Every time my phone buzzed, I found myself hoping it might be her, even though I didn't know what I wanted her to say. People started talking, of course. News like that travels fast in a small town. Some friends avoided me completely, unsure whose side to take. Others called with careful voices, saying things like, "You did the right thing," or "She'll come around eventually." But none of it felt right. Every word sounded like static. Dana stopped by once, bringing coffee and an apology she didn't owe. "Everyone's saying she lied," she told me quietly. "Derek's been telling people he had no idea about the money. He's embarrassed. He's done with her." I nodded but didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know what was being said at bars or dinner tables. I just wanted peace. It didn't come. A few days later, I heard from a nurse at the clinic that Maris had lost her job. Apparently, an argument at work turned ugly after someone brought up the party. The story spread faster than she could stop it. By the end of the week, she'd packed up her desk and left. I wish I could say I felt vindicated. I didn't. I'd thought exposing the truth would make something inside me feel lighter, but instead it hollowed me out. I'd proven my point, but the cost was everything that once mattered. I tried to keep busy. Extra shifts, long walks, cleaning the apartment until there was nothing left to scrub. But at night, I'd catch myself looking at the empty chair across from mine, imagining her sitting there, rolling her eyes, laughing the way she used to before life twisted us into strangers. Eventually, I found myself in a small office with soft lighting and a box of tissues on the table. The therapist's name was Grace, and she listened more than she spoke. For the first few sessions, I barely talked. When I finally did, the words surprised me. I told her I didn't know who I was when I wasn't fixing someone else's mess. She nodded, jotting something down, and asked quietly, "When did you start believing love had to be earned?" That question stayed with me long after the session ended. I thought about every favor, every late-night rescue, every time I'd stepped in before being asked. I realized I'd spent my entire life trying to prove my worth through sacrifice, and the people I helped never saw the cost. At home, the apartment felt both quieter and clearer. The silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was space, unfamiliar, but maybe the kind I finally needed. Months passed before the envelope arrived. It looked ordinary, the kind of mail you almost toss without opening. But when I saw the return address from the county office, something in my chest tightened. Inside was a notice about unpaid property taxes, on an address I hadn't thought about in months. Maris's house. For a long minute, I just stared at the paper, reading the lines over and over. My name was printed clearly at the top. Owner of record, Lena Quinn. The words blurred for a moment as I realized what they meant. Legally, the house still belonged to me. I'd never transferred the title. I'd paid everything off but never signed it over. Maris had been living there all this time under my name. The thought left me cold. I'd spent months trying to move on, building some kind of peace from the wreckage. Now, suddenly, I was dragged back into her mess again. I called the county clerk to confirm, and the woman on the phone was matter of fact. "Yes, Ms. Quinn, the taxes are overdue. You're still responsible for the property until it's transferred." After hanging up, I sat there in silence. There were only two options: Pay the taxes and let her stay, or take back what was mine. Neither felt right. I didn't want revenge anymore, but I couldn't keep carrying the weight of her choices. I drove out there the next afternoon, more out of obligation than curiosity. The street looked the same, lined with tidy lawns and fresh paint, until I reached her driveway. The grass was overgrown, weeds climbing along the fence. The porch light was burnt out, the mailbox stuffed with unopened letters. I stepped inside. The air was stale, the kind of stillness that comes from months of neglect. Empty bottles littered the counter, clothes piled on the couch. The walls that once gleamed now had scuff marks and cracks. Then I saw the photo frame, the one I'd left behind that night. It was lying on the floor near the doorway, the glass cracked down the middle. The picture inside was torn, Mom's smile split right through the center. My throat tightened as I bent down to pick it up. That small piece of our past, something that had once meant love and belonging, was now just another thing broken beyond repair. I moved through the house quietly, noticing Derek's things still scattered around. Shoes by the hall, a jacket thrown over a chair, a half-empty cologne bottle on the dresser. It looked like he'd left in a hurry, maybe after another fight. For a moment, I stood in the middle of the living room, unsure whether to feel anger or pity. The house that was supposed to save her had become a ruin. I realized then that letting her stay wasn't kindness anymore. It was enabling. As I turned to leave, the notice in my hand felt heavier than before. For the first time, I understood what I needed to do. The decision came easier than I expected. I printed the eviction notice, signed my name at the bottom, and mailed it through certified post. There was no anger left in me, only a kind of steady quiet. The paperwork was simple, just dates, signatures, legal words that drew a clean line between what had been mine and what would no longer be hers. It took only 2 days for the storm to hit. I was at the clinic finishing charts when the front door burst open. The sound of heels striking the tile made everyone look up. Maris stood there, eyes red, her voice already shaking. "How could you do this to me?" she shouted. "You're throwing me out on the street." Patience turned to stare. I set down my pen and met her gaze. "Maris," I said softly, "this isn't the place." But she didn't stop. "You're cruel. You wanted to ruin me, and now you have." Her voice cracked, trembling between rage and panic. I walked her into the hallway, away from the crowd. She was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I have nowhere to go," she said, almost a whisper. "You can't really mean this." I looked at her, the sister I'd spent years trying to protect, and saw someone I no longer recognized. "You told everyone you wanted a new life," I said quietly. "Now you can finally start it, without old attachment." She froze, like the words took a second to reach her. Then she turned and walked out, leaving a trail of silence behind her. After she left, I went home and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the copy of the deed in my folder. It felt strange, holding proof of something that had caused so much damage. But for the first time, the paper didn't feel heavy. It felt like release. Within a month, the sale went through. The house that had been our biggest wound was gone. When the check arrived, I didn't celebrate. I just divided it the way my conscience told me to. Half went to a local women's shelter that helped people rebuild their lives after loss. The rest I used to buy a small, one-story place with creaky floors and a tiny backyard where nothing bad had ever happened. On my first night there, I unpacked a single box. Inside was a new frame. I'd printed the photo again, but this time it was just me and Mom. I hung it on the wall above the kitchen table, right where the morning light hit it. I stood there for a while, listening to the quiet, letting it settle around me. No shouting, no guilt, no debt to pay. Just stillness. Turns out, family isn't who you save. It's who stands beside you when you stop. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this wild story. Imagine paying off your sister's entire house, only for her to ban you from her own party. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes it's the push we need to stand up for ourselves. If you liked this emotional roller coaster, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time. Bye.